E eu vou acompanhando com a Camila.
Can I start?
Só um momento, Rodolfo, peraí. Just a moment. É que eu tô vendo aqui um vídeo do Roberto Carlos aqui na minha tela ainda. Eu tava. Deixa eu ver qual que... Ainda bem que eu não mandei aquilo ao vivo. Essas coisas ao vivo são complicadas. Acho que... Deixa eu só confirmar com ela aqui. Ou talvez o André. Tá sim, pode falar, Rodolfo.
Okay.
E o
Well,
William?
John, first of all, I'd like to say thank you very much to accept our invitation to talk with Brazilian people in this time so difficult that we are facing, all the world is facing because of the coronavirus. Here in Brazil, we already have many lives. Live with singers, live with governors, live with the president of banks, talking about economy. But your live is very special for us that use and like free software. I also would like to say to Hector, thank you very much, Hector, to translate this live for us.
I try.
But John, yeah, you're gonna try. But John, people are here to listen to you, not me. But I would like to pass the microphone to you with a question. In your opinion, why 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, IBM acquired Red Hat, paying $34 billion. It is the biggest amount already paid by a software company in the history. And almost in the same time, a little bit before, Microsoft acquired GitHub by $7.5 billion. It's your time. Once again, thank you for your live here with us.
Before you pass the microphone to me, perhaps you would want to say your question in Portuguese.
Ah, sim. Pode falar você mesmo, Rodolfo.
Ok. Pessoal, eu agradeci bastante aqui o Maddog, né? A gente já teve lives aqui no Brasil com cantores, Roberto Carlos, com Marília Mendonça, com governadores, com o presidente dos maiores bancos, mas nada para a gente que é tão especial para a gente que usa e gosta de software livre como ouvir o Maddog, né? E eu passei a palavra para ele fazendo a seguinte pergunta. Na opinião dele, por que quase 2 anos atrás, foi em junho de 2018, a IBM comprou a Red Hat e pagou $34 bilhões pela Red Hat, que foi a maior transação, maior valor de compra de uma companhia de software de toda a história. E um pouquinho antes, a Microsoft tinha comprado a GitHub por $7,5 bilhões. Então, eu queria saber a opinião do Maddog, por que gastaram-se tanto dinheiro em duas empresas, né, que tem a ver com software livre, com código aberto e com trabalho colaborativo. Maddog, it's your time. I did the same question in Portuguese for Brazilian people.
So the first thing I'm going to say is that in reality, people do not buy hardware or software.
I lost here. Can you say it again? Okay.
People do not buy hardware or software.
As pessoas não compram hardware ou software.
People buy solutions.
As pessoas compram soluções.
So even if the problem that you have is playing a game on the internet, you may buy a piece of hardware and software to help you play the game.
Mesmo se o seu problema for utilizar um pedaço da internet ou jogar um jogo, você vai comprar o software ou o hardware justamente para jogar aquele jogo.
But if you really think about it, unless you happen to be a computer nerd and like seeing how computers work, you're buying a computer to solve a problem.
Então, a não ser que você seja um nerd do computador, você vai comprar o computador realmente para solucionar algum tipo de problema.
For the last 30 years, IBM has not one time in their marketing mentioned a piece of hardware or software.
Nos últimos 30 anos, a IBM não esteve no mercado de hardware ou software.
They only talk about business solutions.
Eles sempre falaram, a IBM sempre falou sobre soluções de negócio.
The only exception to that is Watson, where they talk about artificial intelligence. But even then, Watson is a concept, not a piece of hardware or software.
Mesmo assim, a única coisa que eles citam a respeito é o Watson, né, aquela inteligência artificial da IBM, mas o Watson é mais um conceito do que realmente um software ou um pedaço de hardware.
So, about 1998, IBM made a $1 billion investment in free software.
Então, desde 1998, a IBM fez um investimento de mais de $1 bilhão em software.
And the next year, they made the announcement that $1 billion investment had generated $2 billion of business.
E no ano seguinte, a IBM comentou que aquele $1 bilhão... eu me perdi. Rodolfo? Just wait a second. Pode falar.
IBM invests $1 billion, and the next year, this $1 billion generates $2 billion of business.
2 billions. Assim, a IBM disse que no ano seguinte, aquele 1 bilhão investido em software gerou 2 bilhões.
IBM, over the years, has hired kernel engineers to work for them.
E a IBM, ao longo dos anos, tem contratado engenheiros de kernel para trabalhar para eles, né?
But the things the kernel engineers did were available to everybody, even IBM's competitors.
Mas o que os engenheiros de kernel fizeram para a IBM acabou ficando disponível para todo mundo, mesmo para os concorrentes da IBM.
And IBM purposely stepped back and said, we want the Linux development team to develop Linux the way they need to, not the way we need them to.
E a IBM recuou um pouco e disse que eles precisam que o pessoal desenvolva para o Linux do jeito que eles precisam, né? E não do jeito que a IBM quer.
Now, recently, IBM realized that they needed a lot more software in the cloud space.
E aí, nos últimos anos, a IBM chegou à conclusão de que eles precisam de muito mais software no espaço da cloud, né?
IBM saw that Red Hat had a very good cloud solution.
E a IBM notou, claro, que a Red Hat era uma boa fornecedora de soluções para cloud.
So the easiest thing for IBM to do was to simply purchase Red Hat so that Red Hat could continue to develop their cloud solution and make sure it worked well on IBM hardware.
E aí a IBM chegou à conclusão de que seria muito mais fácil comprar a Red Hat e deixar eles trabalhando da forma como eles já estavam. É isso.
But IBM also knows that if you develop a non-standard cloud solution, that people will not use your solution.
E a IBM chegou à conclusão de que construir soluções não padronizadas de cloud, as pessoas não vão usar aquela solução.
So IBM wants their cloud solution to be available on other people's platforms.
E a IBM queria que as soluções de cloud deles estivessem disponíveis nas outras plataformas também.
IBM has a very interesting business model that would take me a long time to go into.
E a IBM tem um modelo de negócio muito interessante que levaria muito tempo para o Maddog explicar aqui, né?
But briefly, their business model is this. They shove off the easy jobs, the easy problems to other people and other companies.
Então, mas basicamente o trabalho da IBM, o modelo de negócio da IBM é esse, eles entregam, né, eles despacham os problemas fáceis, as coisas fáceis para que as outras pessoas façam.
As that business grows, eventually it comes back to IBM.
Enquanto aquele negócio cresce, eventualmente ele volta para dentro da IBM.
Because IBM is a large enough company that they can take on the really hard problems.
Porque a IBM é uma companhia relativamente grande que consegue pegar esses problemas para ela, né? Resolver.
Now, Microsoft is a different model.
A Microsoft é um pouco diferente.
Microsoft, in recent years, has seen a dropping of support for desktops and their traditional business model.
A Microsoft, com os anos, ela notou uma queda no suporte de desktop e da forma como ela trabalha.
They saw a lot of that business going to the cloud.
Ela viu que muitas dessas coisas estavam indo para a cloud.
Microsoft lost out on the telephone model.
A Microsoft vendeu a parte deles de telefone.
Apple, with iOS and Android, took over and did not allow Microsoft into the market.
A Apple com o iOS, né, tinha boa parte do mercado, e o Google com o Android, que dominou o mercado inteiro, né, o restante.
You could say that Microsoft was even a little late to the cloud market with Azure.
E a Microsoft, com a Azure, acabou entrando um pouco tarde no mercado de cloud.
So they fell back to an old model of driving applications to their platform.
E eles voltaram eles recuaram, Rodolfo, ou voltaram?
Many years ago,
Can you repeat, Maddog?
they started using an old business model of how do you get applications to go to your platform.
Ok. E aí a Microsoft voltou a utilizar o modelo antigo de como você faz as aplicações funcionarem na sua plataforma.
In the old days, a company like Digital Equipment Corporation or Hewlett-Packard or IBM would have tools for developers to develop their applications on their platform.
No passado, as empresas como a IBM ou a HP, eles tinham ferramentas para fazer com que os desenvolvedores desenvolvessem para as plataformas deles, né, ou migrassem as coisas.
The best compilers, the best debuggers, the best everything.
Os melhores compiladores, as melhores ferramentas no geral.
So people who are developing new applications would develop on their platform first.
E aí as pessoas que desenvolvessem essas aplicações desenvolviam na plataforma deles primeiro.
They didn't care if those same application developers developed on other platforms over time.
E eles não ligavam se essas aplicações não funcionassem, né? Se tivesse que ser portadas, né, com o passar do tempo para as outras plataformas.
Because if you develop on my platform first, then I always have all of the applications versus other platforms only having some of them.
Porque como você desenvolve para a plataforma deles primeiro, né, na minha plataforma primeiro, eu vou ter todas as aplicações e a concorrência vai ter só algumas partes disso.
John?
Yes?
Looks that the majority of people that are listening to you prefer that you speak without translation, because we announced that the event will be in English. So the majority are preferring that you flow your speech, and then we are recording. We can put subtitles then and release it for the people that doesn't speak English.
That would be fine.
Yeah?
That's fine with me, as long as it's fine with your audience. I feel bad for the people that came in who thought that maybe they would hear it, but I will do whatever the audience wants. Okay. So in any case, what Microsoft is doing by buying GitHub and saying our applications, our development applications work well with GitHub, are develop in GitHub, and we will make sure that you have everything necessary to move your applications to Microsoft Azure. We don't care that you then put your applications on other cloud systems. That's fine. But we want to make sure that everything you create works on Microsoft Azure and works well.
É.
So that is why they paid that much money. That's why they have GitHub. And the real caution that we have to have is to make sure that we don't use proprietary things that Microsoft has, which prevents the applications from working on other platforms. That's what we have to do as developers.
Ok.
So I think I have kind of finished those that question. We can go on to the next question, maybe.
Yep. Ou, Rodolfo, se preferir, eu posso resumir o que ele falou, em vez de falar frase a frase.
Okay. Did you just read the second question?
Yeah, asking something
No,
too.
Hector gave a suggestion. You answer all the question, but Hector, people say that they prefer to get on the prefere fluir a fala do Maddog.
Ok.
Então, é melhor depois a gente faz a tradução.
Tá bom.
Faz a próxima pergunta aí para o Maddog que o pessoal preparou.
Tá. Ok.
Next question, John.
Brilliant.
So do you want me to just read the questions and then answer them? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So
the
first that was question number 0 that I just answered. Question number 1 is, how does open source affect the social environment around it? And the first thing I want to do here is to differentiate, give definitions to the term open source versus free software, because I think that's very important. Open source are licenses like MIT, BSD, and others that allow developers and companies to know what the licensing of the software that they see up on the net and how they can use it. It tells them, yes, you can use this software to develop your products, and here are the rules behind using that software to create your product. They don't have to chase down the developer. They don't have to pay money to them. They don't have to do, all they have to do is obey that license, and they can create their software. It does not force them to do anything else other than obey what's in those licenses. Free software has some additional requirements of them. Free software says you have to take your source code changes, and make them available to your end users or to anybody else who wants to use that software. This is known as copyleft. It says, okay, you have the rights to use this software to develop your products, but you have to make sure that other people have those rights also. And a lot of people don't like this because they say, oh, well, I'm going to be putting all of this work into this software to make it just what my customers want, and I don't want to have to make that available to my competitors. But the problem with that rationale is you got the bulk of that software for free. The bulk of that software was developed by other people. The bulk of that software allowed you to create your product in the first place. And what we're requiring in the license is that you give that right to other people. So this is the difference between all open source, all the different open source licenses, and free software, which is also known as copyleft or the GPL or other things like that. Free software protects the end user. I have a drawer full of old computer systems, little single board computers in my desk that are no longer of any use to me because they were developed by companies that only used an open source license and not a free software license. I was not able to get the source code for the operating system that they put on those devices. And so when that company went out of business, or when that company lost interest in the product, then the fixes I needed to make that product useful disappeared. With free software, you can say, oh, Maddog, I don't have the capabilities of fixing the software. But if there's enough people who bought this product, you could get together as a group and say, maybe somebody in the group has the resources or has the skills to fix it. Or maybe we can put some money together and buy the expertise from somebody who has it, as long as we have the source code that we can give to them and say, here's the problem, can you fix it? And so this is the biggest difference between free software and open source. So now you have to say, how does this affect the social environment around it? And by that, I guess, I'm supposing you mean, how does this affect the community of people? How does this affect society in general? And the way it can be done is to take a look at the longevity of different types of computers. It used to be that we could use a slide rule to send somebody to the moon. The problem is we can't do that anymore. We are dependent upon computers. If I was to snap my fingers and all the software was to disappear on the face of the earth, airplanes would fall from the sky. Cities would go into deadlock because traffic signals would break down. Trains would stop running. Cars would stop running. Software is no longer a luxury. It is a necessity. And if you take a look at things like elevators, they used to be run with relays and things like that. Now you have microcomputers inside that you press the button and it tells the elevator when to go up and down. What happens when the company that made that elevator goes out of business? What happens when the car company decides they're no longer going to update the code inside of your car? What happens when your router from D-Link or Linksys stops working because they've gone on to the next model? These are problems that we're going to see more and more. A few years ago, cash machines in Brazil had a problem because most of the ATMs, the cash machines, used an operating system called OS2, made by IBM, the largest computer company on the face of the earth. And IBM said, we're no longer going to update OS2. We're no longer going to put it on new computers. We're no longer going to put out bug fixes. And all these banks that had these ATM machines throughout Brazil were stuck. And so they looked at various operating systems. But because some of these used 386 systems, Microsoft could not help them. Only one operating system was reasonable to put on because it supported 386s, 486s, low-end Pentiums. It was secure, it was networked, it was Linux. And so a large number of the banks started using Linux in their ATM machines. And one of them even put a little penguin on the front of it to thank the Linux community for doing that. This is how the community is affected. This is how society is affected, sometimes invisibly. Your lottery system by Caixa Econômica Federal works off of Linux. Why? Because it's open. You need a lottery system to be open. People need to trust the lottery system. They need to know that you can't fool with the lottery system, that you can't send all of your money to a certain political person. They need to be able to inspect the code of the lottery system. And this is one of the reasons why Debian was chosen as the operating system to run Caixa Econômica Federal's lottery system.
Yeah.
Another function of society is to provide jobs to people. So if you say, well, we'll just continue to send money to Microsoft and buy operating systems to come into Brazil, why can't you use some of that money to create jobs for programmers in Brazil? Because once the money's left Brazil, it's gone forever. There's only so much cachaça that Bill Gates will drink. Steve Ballmer drank a lot more cachaça, but that's a different subject. The thing is, if you instead you said, keep your licenses, keep your money, we're going to keep the money here in Brazil. And we're going to give jobs to young programmers in Brazil to make this free software better. That would be millions and millions and billions of reais each year. So, go ahead, Brazilians. Continue to send your money outside of Brazil. Continue to send your money to the United States. Continue to send your money there. Don't create jobs for Brazilians. Continue doing that, Brazil. And it's not only that, but what happens if Trump gets mad at you? I question sometimes saying this because I can't even imagine my country doing this, but it could happen that my country says to Brazil, no, we're not going to send you any more Microsoft licenses because we don't like you anymore. And what would you do? All these systems that ran off of Microsoft, you're helpless. And you say, oh, Maddog, that would never happen. And I only have one word for that: Cuba. Cuba is an example of a country that my country does not do business with for over 60 years. So long that we've forgotten why we don't want to do business with Cuba. And yet we don't. And we're not even allowing them to have medical supplies to fight coronavirus. We even twice refused medical doctors from Cuba to come to the United States to help out because we were too proud to accept them. So from an international protection software feeling, because computers are no longer a luxury, you need to have control over where the software is created. You need to understand how it works, and you need to train people in your country how to repair it and make it go forwards. So this is another reason how free software affects the society. I think that Brazil wants to develop more software that's produced inside of it, more solutions for people. But one way of doing that is to allow students to really inspect how an operating system and how compilers work. These are some of the most sophisticated pieces of software, and they also touch the very bottom of computers. So if you understand how a compiler works, if you understand how an operating system works, if you understand how a database works, you probably can write fairly good application software to help to create solutions for people. And this is why I encourage open source to be used in educational situations. Because when you teach with closed source software, what you're really teaching is how do you use a database to solve your problem, which is not bad. But if you say we're going to teach that with open source, you can say, how do you use a database to solve your problem? But the second thing you can teach is, how does that database solve your problem? And the third thing you teach is, how can you improve the database to solve your problem better? So I tell people that open source teaches 3 times, not just once. And I encourage educators to use open source, not only in teaching computer science, but also teaching things like English as a second language. Why should students have to go out and buy books, paperbacks, things like that, when there's something like Project Gutenberg, where there's hundreds of thousands of some of the best texts in the world that's available to pull down off the net? When you're teaching music, why not use open source music to be able to teach music? You know, if you're teaching business, business should be taught with open source business models and to understand open source licensing and how that works, and to understand an open source business model of how to make money with open source. So these are ways that society can embrace open source, and I hope that they do that. I'm going to go on to the next one, which is how to make money with open source, profiting in a balanced way with the community. So this touches a little bit on what I've talked before. So if you say to me, how can I make money with open source? I'll say back to you, if your name is not Bill Gates, how do you make money with Microsoft? Well, if your name is Bill Gates, it's easy. You have somebody else write the software for you, and you just grab the money and profits off of software licenses. That's simple. But if your name is not Bill Gates, how do you make money off of Microsoft? Well, you can teach people how to use Microsoft. You can be a systems administrator for Microsoft systems. You can write applications that go on top of Microsoft. You can create solutions that use Microsoft and charge people for the solutions. You can add hardware to your Microsoft solution and sell the entire system. All of these things you can do with free software just as well as you can do with Microsoft. And you can do one more thing with free software that you can't do with Microsoft. And that's, you can change the software to work better for the customer's solution. Let's say I have 2 glass rods, and the rods are very smooth on the ends, and I want to glue them to make them stick together. You've tried to glue glass rods, I'm sure. It's very hard to make them stick. The glue just breaks off. But if you take a piece of sandpaper and rough up the edges and then apply the glue, the rods stick together much better. Software is the same. 2 packages may not work together, but if you had the source code for one or the other or both, you might be able to change them so they work together very well. And that's something you can do with free software that you can't do with open source. You create a better solution. Often solutions are not the software itself or the hardware. It's how well you deliver service to the end user customer, the person who actually has the problem. You don't have the problem. The problem is not yours. The problem is your customers. They have the problem. And if you can devise a solution using open source that's better for them, then they will pay you more. They value you as a customer or as a supplier. There were 5 companies in the world that test out steam turbines for how efficient they are. 4 of them use proprietary closed source software. 1 uses open source in St. Petersburg, Russia. The 4 that use the proprietary software, it often takes a month or 2 months for them to provide the solutions that their customers need because they have to wait for the company that makes the software. The man in St. Petersburg can typically make the change overnight and give his customers a solution the next day. So who gets the better solution problem? The man in St. Petersburg, the customers. And he has more customers from around the world using his turbine testbed than any of the others because he can do this work overnight. This is how you provide a better solution to your customers. So there are many ways, and most people look at these solutions as a service type of solution. But if you look at the broader solution, the one that includes hardware and software and longevity and flexibility, then free software wins hands down. And this is one of the reasons that we're working on Quinta's Lucus at the University of Sao Paulo, because we recognized that it's too hard for students and people in Brazil to get the Raspberry Pi. We decided to manufacture these systems so that students in high school, students at universities can get these systems, can create solutions for customers in a rapid method, and then be able to design their own companies and their own businesses to deliver these solutions to customers. This is why we're doing this. Not to make money, we don't care. We want to have better and more jobs for Brazilians. And as this crisis ends, I think this is going to be very important, because I would encourage Brazilians who may have been thrown out of work, their companies may have gone bankrupt, to join together to make solutions, working together in cooperatives. It may be very small cooperatives at first, but they will grow. I have a friend of mine, his name is Douglas Conrad. He started a company in San Jose, in the state of Santa Catarina. He started with just himself and his wife. She was the bookkeeper and he did the support work. Today, he employs more than 60 people in his company using free software. And the software that he puts on top of the Asterisk open source software is also free. He gives it away. But he's developed this customer base that allows him to grow his business. Another friend of mine named Dennis Galvon has a company called iSolve, and they use free software to develop their business and grow it. So you can develop, 4Linux itself is another example of a consulting business that started off small, continued to build, and is giving jobs to people. Not giving them, of course the people have to work for them, but making jobs available for people.
It's just we need to remember that open source software have a big role in social. There's a big social role in the world, here in Brazil. And people sometimes forget about it and just use the software, and when grow enough, just pay, go to another software. We need to remember that it's just what you're talking about, that free software is a social, that there is a social role in free software at all.
So I talked about how the money might leave Brazil, by paying for proprietary software. And if the money stays inside of Brazil, where people, instead of paying the license fee, if people pay young software developers inside of Brazil to make the software better, to support the software and so forth, that's good. And obviously that's good. But think about it further. You're being paid as a young developer inside of Brazil. You need to buy food. You need to buy housing. You need to buy clothes. You want to take your significant other out for a nice time in the town. That means the money that you're being paid, instead of it going to the United States, it's now supporting food stores and hotels and apartment houses. And those people need to have software. So they take that money, every dollar that you stop from going outside of Brazil and you redirect it to inside of Brazil, it's like $10 otherwise. And this money helps to build the economy. The other thing about Brazil is, despite all of the technical and manufacturing and things, Brazil is still a large agricultural country. And agriculture is a wonderful thing. We obviously can't live without it. But the problem is, while it produces money, it produces it in a very slow way. The difference between the raw materials of agriculture and the finished product, the amount of difference is smaller than if you take and create a well-needed product in manufacturing. And so, you can take a look at how computers and automation and everything improves the quality of life. And it's tremendous. So the more that Brazil develops that, the more people will benefit from it.
Okay.
And particularly in areas like your Northeast, which I know there's a lot of people that don't make very much money. Let's develop a manufacturing capability there, and free software can do that.
Maddog, Rodolfo will speak.
Yes?
We are receiving a lot of questions in the chat. I think it's a good idea to, can you intercalate one question that you already received with one question of our audience? Because the people, they are doing a lot of questions in the chat.
The only thing is that maybe the questions that I talk about will answer some of the questions you've already got in the chat.
Yep.
Or maybe something I say will answer that. So I would suggest...
Hector is filtering the
Yeah, I was reading here, and I can ask you something.
Okay, well, go ahead then.
There's first one is kind of funny. Oracle was giving a lot of certifications and courses to use his cloud, and we know that maybe everything that Oracle puts the hand open source will end in some way, like MySQL, Jenkins, OpenOffice. What this means for you, if Oracle trying to stretch to get more people using his own cloud?
Well, of course. I mean, Oracle is a company. Of course they want more people to buy their software, to send more money to Larry Ellison so he can buy a bigger boat, so he can have more planes, so he can have a bigger house with more Japanese koi fish in his pond. Of course they do. Now, I actually talk about this in one of the other questions, which is, does it seem like there's less people talking about free software now?
Yep.
And so I do not, I'm a kind of strange free software guy. First of all, I prefer free software over open source. And I prefer open source over closed source. But unlike other free software people, I do not spit on you just because you decide to buy an iPhone. You may have some perfectly good reasons to buy an iPhone. And I'm not going to call you stupid or, but I will try and make you understand the differences and why it's important that Brazil have a good free software and open source community.
Okay.
And so that you can make an informed decision between them. Now, MySQL is a great database. Postgres is a great database. Firebird is a great database, and they're all free software. Maybe people have looked at all of these and they really say they have to have Oracle. And they've done the cost analysis and they say, we still need Oracle. Then I am not going to spit on you for buying Oracle. However, that's your decision and you have made it. If I do not make you understand, or if I can't explain to you the benefits of using free software, that's my problem. If you don't listen, that's your problem. If you don't think about it, if you don't do the analysis, it's your problem. And if you're working for a company that's trying to make this decision and you don't make the right analysis, then it's your company's problem that they hired you in the first place.
Yeah.
So this is my feelings about it. And Oracle is doing everything that a company would want to do to have them buy their product. One of the problems that free software has is because of the very nature of free software. We don't have all of the marketing money that a company like Oracle has, or a company like Microsoft has. We don't have millions and millions and millions of dollars to buy advertisements on TV or put advertisements in magazines or things.
Yeah.
We have to rely a lot more on word of mouth, people talking, people exchanging ideas.
Okay.
I mean, do you really think that it costs 400 US dollars to make the shiny plastic disc that you go to the PC store and you buy from Microsoft Office? No, it costs about 10 cents to make that disc. And the rest of the money is going into advertising. Take a look at the number of people that Microsoft employs, maybe 70,000 people. And out of that 70,000 people, about 28,000 of them are in sales and marketing, and therefore have no useful purpose. Then of the number of people that are left, some people work in the cafeteria, some people are guards, some people paint strips on the sidewalk, some people mark how far you're supposed to stay apart because of coronavirus. Some people put software into boxes and some people take software out of boxes. So if you take a look at the number of people with the title of software engineer, there might be 6,000. Take a look at the number of people who contribute to open source projects on GitHub. It's 28 million. And granted, all of those don't do it full time, but they don't take coffee breaks either. And they don't go to interminable business meetings. There's a lot of things they don't do. So the number of people creating free software is gigantic. We need to think about that.
Yeah.
We need more. So you say, well, but look at all these people that don't contribute to free software. They just use it. So what? I mean, this was started by Steve Jobs, actually, because before Steve Jobs, computers were computing things. People bought computers to compute. As Steve Jobs said, oh no, the computer's really a music thing. It's a TV thing. It's a phone thing. It's a consumer item. And people that are consumers are typically not technical. They don't know how things work, and they don't care. All they care is it works. And it works well. That's all they care about.
Yeah.
They don't care about the glory of free software. They don't care about the wonderfulness of the Linux kernel. They don't care. All they care about is it works.
Yeah.
Now, we have a responsibility to make sure that our educators, our political people, know about free software and think about free software. And particularly in places outside of the United States and Western Europe. Because the United States and Western Europe makes a lot of the software and exports it to various places around the world. So they have a desire to hold that software to themselves. They don't want Brazil creating new software for themselves. They don't want Brazil exporting their software because that would be competition to them. And people say, well, Maddog, if you feel like this, you're a United States citizen. Why are you telling Brazil to generate their own free software? It's because we are 50 states, 50 small countries. And I live in the small country of New Hampshire. We only make two things in New Hampshire, maple syrup and software. And there's only so much maple syrup that Bill Gates is going to drink. So I'm tired of sending all my money to the small country of Redmond, Washington, just to get his software that my software people could make themselves.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm talking to Brazil this way, because I love Brazil and I love the people in it. And I think that you could have a software economy if you just reached out and grabbed it.
Yeah. There's a question here about the Caninos Locus. Just get the name. There's no name. Project. Oh, what do you think if Caninos Locus? What is the market share of Caninos Locus in IoT? And if you see if he can fight against Raspberry Pi or something like that. This is really growing.
Okay, so I've been working on Caninos Locus now for probably 5 or 6 years. I've been working with Professor Zufo at the University of Sao Paulo. And if the only thing that we were to do was try and duplicate the Raspberry Pi, we probably would be done by now. But we're not trying to do that. We're actually trying to make a better system than the Raspberry Pi. And it's been hard because we're not properly funded. It's been hard because there's been some other issues along the way, but we are getting very close. We have the systems ready to produce. However, there was a bureaucratic technicality, which I'm sure that all of our listeners are surprised to hear about, that there could be any bureaucracy in Brazil. But it's true. And unfortunately, I'm having a telephone call coming. Could you give me just a second?
Okay.
Hi, Richard. I'm fine. I'm on a telephone call. What's up? Yep, you're welcome to come over. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Bye. I'm sorry. That was a guy who's cutting up a big tree that fell down inside of my house and I need to have the tree cut so I can mow my lawn. Let's see, where was I? Oh, the Raspberry Pi and Kinesis Locus.
Yeah.
There are various. So you asked about IoT, and even though a lot of people use the Raspberry Pi for IoT, there are certain things that are bad about it. It doesn't work at very high ambient temperatures. So really, it only works at up to about 50 degrees Celsius. And as you know, in places in Brazil, you can have 45 or even 50 degrees Celsius ambient temperature, which means the Raspberry Pi would burn up. Even if you put a fan on it, you need a difference in temperature in order for the heat to escape properly. The Labrador that we have works up to 70 degrees Celsius. So it might not even need a fan. And that would be a good thing because fans not only use electricity, but they typically are the first thing to fail inside of a computer system next to a hard disk. And particularly if you're in a salty environment, like down by the shore, where the salt air carries salt, the sea air carries salt, and the salt erodes the fans and the disk drives.
Yeah.
So by eliminating the fan and using a solid state device, the length of time that the Labrador would run would be very long. The Raspberry Pi is not very good with electrostatic discharge. That's where you shuffle across the rug and you touch a piece of metal and you get a shock. The Raspberry Pi doesn't do very well with that. We've had 12 Raspberry Pis fail at the university labs because of ESD. We haven't had a single Labrador fail, even though we use the Labradors a lot more than the Raspberry Pis. The Raspberry Pi typically comes as a single board. This is difficult because sometimes you want to cut down on the number of components on the board to make it cheaper, to make it more dependable, or you may have a different other, which is not very easy to do with the Raspberry Pi. The Labrador comes in two boards, a core board that has all the active components and the I/O board, which you can tailor for your application. The core board is difficult to get correct. It's an 8-layer board, and there's a lot of very interesting timing issues between the CPU, memory, I/O, high-speed I/O peripherals. The base board, the I/O board, is a lot easier to make. It's only 4 layers. The layers are thicker because they have to carry more current, and they run at a lower frequency, so they're easier to design. So we feel that the Labrador will give people a much better model for doing IoT.
Okay.
The program also has a tiny little computer about the size of a 10-cent piece, which we call the Pulga.
Yeah.
And the Pulga has all the components on it for doing very low power sensing of information. So the Pulga can transfer the information to the Labrador can process it, and then we will pass it on from there. There is a third computer which we're in the process of designing, and this computer will use multiple core boards to create, in effect, a low power, high capacity Beowulf supercomputer.
Nice.
And and we have also a 32-bit version of it and a 64-bit version. So developing all those systems took a certain amount of work. And the second thing is, if you're going to manufacture these in Brazil, you need what is known as a supply chain. You need to be able to get the processors you need, the boards you need, the parts you need in just the right quantity to keep manufacturing them. This is difficult, particularly if you're working on a really tight budget, because the people that have the parts want to have the parts paid for before they deliver them. So you have to raise the money for 1 million CPUs and then start manufacturing. And then you have the finished systems and you have to sell them to get more money to buy more parts. Eventually, you build up enough money so that this becomes a continuum. But you need to start that, and that's difficult.
Yeah.
The good news of all of this is hopefully in a month or two, and the coronavirus has put us behind on this, but in a month or two, we should have everything worked out to start to manufacture these Labrador boards in a continuous situation where we would be able to provide not only Brazil, but all of Latin America with enough of these Labradors to be able to make the prices drop.
Nice. You talk about coronavirus. There's a couple of questions here. Gabriel Curpetino, Natalia Felix, and there's another one here. No. How the open source community can help with this virus problem? I know there's a lot of startups in Europe paying for a solution, but about the open source community, the free software community.
Well, actually, a friend of mine, Alvaro Justin, has been helping with data analysis using open source tools. And he had a URL for a site that is working with us. And I can give you the URL later after this. You can add it to the notes of the meeting.
Nice.
The University of Sao Paulo has been, well, they've been doing work. Let's put it that way. I'm not allowed to talk about the work right now because it has to be certified and everything before they can announce it. So they are doing work, and I'm very proud of the work that they're doing. They're going to license their work using an open source license so that other people can help with the distribution of this.
Nice.
I don't know. I mean, just look at what people are doing, particularly universities. They may have programs that they're announcing that you can look at and say, I can work with that, I can help with that. Which actually brings us down to another question that was in the list of questions. How can I participate in developing open source?
That's the third one.
Mm-hmm. And so first of all, if you're a systems administrator, maybe for a company or for a nonprofit group, when you have a new problem to solve, look for an open source solution first. Don't just say, oh, I'm going to buy an Oracle database, or, look at other solutions. And whenever somebody comes up to you and says, and asks for the solution by giving you the name of a product, that is a bad sign, right? You don't say, I need Microsoft Office. You say, I need an Office product that can do this. You don't say, I need Oracle database. Or, you say, I need a database engine that can do this, right? You don't say all these things. Get the definition of what you need in the abstract term, and then compare what the answers are in the exact terms. If you are a developer, or if you know how to program and you want to program, then what you can do is you can, pardon me, I'm going to make that go away. Okay. If you're a programmer, then what I would suggest is, what else are you interested in? If you're interested in music, then look for groups that are working on music applications. If you're interested in video, then look at groups that are working on video applications. Look for something that you have as a passion that goes beyond the programming, because then you'd be really interested in working on that particular thing. Go to GitHub and see what applications already exist. Don't start a new one just because you want to start a new one. oh my God, how many CD players do we need, right? But find one that is pretty good and you can help to make it better. The way you start that is to take a look at the source code for the application. You take a look also at their bug tracking mechanism. What bugs do they have? Can you fix those bugs? And so you start to fix the bugs, and then after a while, the development team will work with you and say, gee, you're really good at fixing those bugs. Would you like to write one of these new pieces of code that has new functionality? And so now you start to working on new pieces of code. You have to learn how to make your code fit with theirs so that when somebody else looks at the code, it doesn't look like it was written by 10 people. It looks like it was written by one person. So it may not be the coding the coding style that you like the best, but that's not the issue. The issue is coding style that will be easier for somebody else to maintain after you leave the project in the future. So these are ways you can get, and then after a while, they'll say, you're really good at doing this. Would you like to be one of the main developers of the project? And that's when you get into that and you start to build your expertise and your knowledge.
Yeah. There are another question here about Red Hat, but it's like or question number 3 from Julio. It's how much the free software is influenced or controlled by big companies, and he talks about Red Hat, systemd, Firewall G, Network Manager, Pulse, Audio, something like that.
Okay, so I really don't want to get into the argument about systemd versus all the technical arguments and stuff, but there is, Red Hat, when they started up early, kind of concentrating not on the desktop, but on servers. And servers have different needs than a simple desktop. A desktop, one person is effect using it. A server system, you may have tens of thousands of people use it, hundreds of thousands of processes, millions of threads. And so the needs of the server and huge numbers of disks. So the needs of the server are very much different than the needs of the desktop. So, when Red Hat looks at things like, how do you manage all these systems? They may decide that they want to take some technology and throw it at the solution. Again, whether you want to accept that technology or not is somewhat up to you, somewhat up to the distribution that you're working with. And there's so many distributions. If you don't like that distribution's decision, you can go to somebody else. So these are the types of things that people need to consider. And having a big company working on a distribution of Linux, I can't get excited about that as long as there are other distributions of Linux that people can look at and choose to go to if they want to. Again, it becomes their choice.
Okay. I say something?
I think.
Okay, let's take another question. There's the last one talks about the friction between some communities, maybe particular like systemd, and why this happened? Why just? It's a complicated question, but why Debian is so afraid of systemd or something like that? They just don't want to change. If the base is the same.
But again, I mean, there's lots of people that were used to, the old RC style of startup, and even then there were differences between System 5 and BSD. Okay, so there were differences in the way of doing it, and there's other people that didn't like that systemd had more of a using binaries and binary stuff to do it than flat files of feeding the information in. It was, to them, it was more complex, even though it was solving perhaps a larger problem. And again, I don't really want to get into the argument of which one is better, if any. I think that, people over time will decide which is the way to go. And there may always be two different ways. That's up to them. But why is there friction? For all the reasons we have frictions in other things. Some people feel some way and get kind of religious about it, and other people feel other ways. Again, I don't spit on people because all I want them to do is to think about what they are religious about.
Okay.
And allow me to do the stuff that I want to do without, coming after me.
Nice. There is our questions now. Maybe I read everyone from the people that watching. There is a question about the Free Software Foundation. If you can read and answer.
Well, I don't know what the question is.
It's one of ours that we sent from email. Franklin, and is the question too. What do you think about the problems between the free software? No. Is with the resignation from the Free Software Foundation, what do you think? Which ways the Free Software Foundation must be from now, in your opinion?
I would rather not talk about Richard Stallman.
Okay.
And his resignation. I have certain opinions about it. I will say that I've known Richard Stallman since 1986. And I've had various interactions with him over the years. Richard hasn't always been the easiest person to get along with, mostly because he has very fixed ideas. I will also say that in the beginning, I started off as an open source person, but the more that I listened to him and the more I heard what he said, the more I became free software. I think that there's two different sides to Richard. One is the technical person who believes in free software and all the other things that go around it. And then the other is the part of Richard Stallman who is very vocal about other things which really have nothing to do with free software. But yet people look at those things and feel, oh, well, because he feels that way about them, we can't have him dealing with free software anymore. And I think this is a false thing. I would not have asked Richard to leave the Free Software Foundation, nor would I have even hinted that he leave the Free Software Foundation. If I was MIT, I would have not forced him out of MIT. But that's their decision. And that's something they have to live with. My personal feeling is that over time, people may go back and reevaluate that issue. And I hope that at that time, they do the right thing when it comes to Richard, whatever that is.
Okay. Let's say talk about the cloud. There's here is the question from Julio. We see today we see few people talking about kernel development or even free software contributions. You say something about this, but how we can improve this scenario here in Brazil?
Well, first of all, again, we may be seeing the expansion of the use of software versus the number of people who need to work on the kernel. The kernel is a relatively small thing, very specialized. And in reality, if with faster and faster CPUs, with faster and faster memory, with faster and faster of all these other things, the amount of things that you need to have inside the kernel gets smaller. And in fact, the more that you can force outside of the kernel to operate out in user space, the better it is for the kernel. Because if a user level thing crashes, you can simply restart it. If the kernel crashes, you have to reboot the whole system. That's a problem.
Yeah.
So one of the selling points of a microkernel is the smallness of the kernel, which means that supposedly the kernel is easier to inspect and easier to get correct. The trade-off, the major trade-off of a kernel of a microkernel is the inefficiency of the microkernel in message passing and things like that. But that can be overcome by faster and faster processes with more and more threads. So, you know, I'm actually much more in a lot of ways interested in the level that's right above the kernel, libraries, compilers, and stuff like that. So I would rather have more people concentrating on libraries and compilers than on the kernel itself. To give you an idea, in the Unix, I did this study about 30 years ago. In the Unix kernel, there are 154 system calls, 154 separate pieces of functionality. Open a file, read a block of code, write a block of code, get memory, free up memory. These are all kernel functionalities. Compare that to over 10,000 at the time, 10,000 subroutine calls that did various pieces of functionality, and some of them were very complex. So where is the real functionality of the GNU system, if you want to call it that? The real functionality is in the libraries. And the functionality of the kernel, although very important, it has to be very efficient, is relatively small compared to the libraries. So having better libraries, more efficient libraries, and then moving that out to applications which create another part of the solution problem. When we were doing Alpha Linux, we had a problem. The math library, sine, cosine, tangent, things like that, on the Alpha was very efficient because Digital had hired a mathematician to go through the entire math library and make it more efficient. And the Linux people wanted to have the source code for the math library for the Alpha, naturally. My company said, we'll give you the binaries, but not the source, because if we give you the source, then Sun Microsystems will be able to copy it and we'll lose our advantage. So I was in the middle of this. I had people beating me up on either side, free software computer people, we want the source code. And Digital, my management, saying, no, we're not going to give it to you. So one day, I answered back, somebody on the net sent me some mail about this, and I said, if you guys are such hotshot programmers, you write a better math library. And then there was silence on the other end of the internet. And 2 days later, I got this message. Sine is now 2% faster. A day or two later, cosine is 1.5% faster. And subroutine by subroutine, down the math library, they made the whole thing faster than Digital's math library. Except for one subroutine that never got any faster. And I asked them about that. And they said, hardly anybody uses that. Nobody cares. And so it never got any faster. So this is the type of stuff that I want people to work on. And actually, it was the driving point of why I wanted Alpha Linux in the first place. because Intel Linux was a 32-bit system. And we had the first affordable 64-bit microprocessor in the world. And what I wanted to do was have people work on research of using very large address spaces to make things run faster. And that's why I wanted the Linux kernel, was because you can do research with Microsoft. If you sign a special document with them, they'll even give you the source code. But after you do your research, you can't publish the results of your research. You can't show people the source code that you wrote. You can write white papers about it. You can do all that stuff, but you can't show them the source code. You can't give it to somebody else. You can't have somebody else help you with it. And I wanted somebody that could share their source code and share the research. And that is why I talked to Linus Torvalds into porting Linux to the alpha.
Nice. There's another question here from André Jacon. He would like to understand why so many big companies that earn billions of dollars do not support developers like the Python community, for example. He wrote Guido van Halsen, but there's a lot of companies that use open source software and doesn't give anything back, or just don't retribute with nothing.
I could tell you my own feelings on that, except that I'm not allowed to curse on this program, and I'm not allowed to call these people what I think of them. To be fair, I think that I think people just don't think about it that much.
Selfish.
It's more complex than that, I think. A lot of the people that actually understand where the free software is coming from are so far removed from the management who doles out this type of money. A lot of these large companies have marketing money that they can just give to projects and stuff, but nobody goes to the marketing people and say, hey, we have a person who needs some money, some funding, and we use a lot of their software every year. Why don't we do that?
Yeah.
And we can make a big deal out of it. We can get some marketing out of it and stuff. But they don't do that. And so the marketing people have no real idea. But if the marketing people were more into free software, then they might say, okay, we'll take 10% of our marketing dollars and we'll put it towards these projects which are of importance to our engineering staff. That's a great idea, actually. And it's something that maybe the Linux Professional Institute could help to foster.
Yeah. Okay, I think that I will meet the last question now, because we are running out of time. The last one from our list, it's about a new operational system, if will be a new operational system.
So I used to work at Bell Laboratories many years ago when Unix was still relatively new. And we used to sit around Bell Labs and we used to say, I don't know what the next operating system will be, but I bet it will be Unix. Meaning that there were all these proprietary systems out there, and we could see that Unix was such a great operating system that we thought that all these other operating systems would simply disappear and Unix would be the one. But then I said to the group, well, that's an interesting idea. I don't know what the next operating system will be, but I bet it will be called Unix. Now, you have to understand, what is an operating system really? And in reality, an operating system is a series of programming interfaces that you write your program to, and your program then runs. It may run slowly, It may run inefficiently. It may run on one of several types of processors, but it's not just one operating system that your program could run on. As a matter of fact, you could run your program inside of a container, which could actually run on other operating systems. So what it really is a set of application programming interfaces, or application binary interfaces, ABIs, that allow your program to run. And this is created by a soup of standards. In the case of Unix systems, that standard is known as a single Unix specification. And if your system doesn't meet that standard, then you can't call it Unix. So this is a formal standard that defines what an operating system is. How you develop that system underneath of that standard, how you actually implement those calls, is up to you, as long as they do what they're supposed to do. And so you can have many different operating systems that are all Unix. And from the outside, they're indistinguishable from Unix. In fact, they are Unix. But how you implement them is something completely different. So coming back to, when I said, I don't know what the next operating system will be, but that'd be called Unix, I was only off by a couple letters. It's actually called Linux. But this means that we don't know what this operating system will be. So Linux over time could change dramatically. Linus Torvalds could say next month, I think we should have a microkernel. And he would develop a microkernel and replace the existing Linux system with that microkernel. He probably would cringe at me saying that, but it's possible. In fact, today, if you want to get Debian, we're going to be exacting here, the Debian distribution of the GNU operating system. The Debian distribution of the GNU operating system / with the Linux kernel. The Debian distribution of the GNU operating system with the herd kernel. The Debian distribution of the GNU operating system with the BSD kernel. All of these are binary compatible with the application, even though they have different kernels. So, what our operating system is going to be in the future, and we may not use all of the power of the Linux system to control things like the Pulga. The Pulga is very small. The Pulga is only sensing stuff and passing on the information. It may not need all the features of the Linux kernel. So will there be other operating systems other than Linux? Probably. I don't know. I feel very fortunate to have seen Linux from the beginning and to have had some type of effect on Linux and free software that I'm proud of. And but I'm not going to lose sleep over thinking about whether or not Linux is going to be the operating system into the far future. So.
Okay. Well, I think the question is over in our time too, but
I will say that besides the fact I don't care whether or not it's Linux into the far future, I do hope it's free software. I do hope that continues, that people continue to contribute, people continue to have ideas and dreams that are facilitated with free software. And I hope that helps the development of the software to spread out across the world. one of the reasons why I like going to places like Campus Party and Debian and stuff is because when programmers work on closed source software, you never see the programmer's name in the code. You don't see it in the documentation. It just says Microsoft or Oracle. You never see the people behind it. But in free software, you can see them. And so I'm looking at these people. I know these people. And someday I'm going to reach out and I'm going to skim these people off the top like you skim cream off of the top of milk. You have the milk and the cream floats to the top, you skim it off, and you've got the cream of the milk. And I will have the cream of the programmers. And that's why I like coming to these events. I get to meet the cream.
Nice. That make a lot of sense. Okay, Maddog, I think we're done here. Or if you want to talk about that shared storage that I think is awesome. If you remember the name, you say that you will search about it.
Yeah, I'll have to search for it because I don't remember the name. But
Okay.
I will search it and send it to you, okay?
Okay, and we put it on the end of the video or something like that.
Okay.
Okay, we're gonna give some course here for some class for the people here, and I think it's it. I think we're done. I'd like to thank
All
you
right.
for your time, for your patience, and talk with us. You come here and for Linux from time to time, and we can talk with you. But the people out there can't, and this is very nice. We can give the word to you.
Well, we can try doing this again sometime.
Yeah, it's easier. We can reach a much more people, and maybe it's cheap.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your help. Take it easy, okay?
Thank you, Maddog. Thank you. Agora I will talk in Portuguese here for the people. Ok? Thank you, Maddog.
I'll stay
Bye.
on until you finish.
You want? Pessoal, então a gente vai sortear um curso. Eu tô com a Camila aqui no WhatsApp para ver se eu não falo nada errado, né? E o pessoal que se inscreveu naquele link, né? Eu não sei como que a Camila bolou isso, né? O pessoal que acabou se inscrevendo, a gente vai sortear um curso para vocês. É um só, né, Camila? Responde aí. Camila. Ela vai responder, peraí. There's a little delay between the video and the WhatsApp here. I will open the link. I send the Caninos Locos link to the people here too.
Okay, thank you.
Where is? Okay, yeah. Um só. Camila respondeu um só. Então deixa eu entrar lá. Eu vou compartilhar minha tela. I will share my screen, okay, Maddog? To show the people here that I'm doing the right thing, the fair.
And when you have the video done and you do the subtitles in Portuguese,
Yep.
Send me a link and I will put that up on my Facebook page so
Okay.
other people can see it.
Ok, nice. Vai ser um curso só um mês. Deixa eu pegar aqui o link, Camila, que eu me perdi. Caramba, cadê o negócio aqui? Então deixa eu entrar lá. Gente, pessoal, tem uma tela meio estranha aqui, mas eu vou... Ok. Deixa eu achar o login agora. Show. Aqui. Just a second, Maddog. Second, a minute.
Take your time.
Okay, put here. Let me. Certo. Deixa eu só achar aqui. Ok, só sortear então, Camila. Eu vou colocar aqui na página da frente. Ok. Bom, acho que minha tela vai aparecer. My screen will appear here to the people now. And, oh, no, let me change that. Ok. Eu vou clicar aqui no link sortear e aí a gente vai aparecer o nome da pessoa que ganhou, tá bom? Tem todas as outras sorteios que a gente fez aí, tá bom? Então eu vou clicar aqui, só espero que não bugue tudo, né? Deixa eu clicar aqui, sortear. Ok, sortear. Calma aí. Maddog, the people are thanking you for the video, for your talk. Okay.
I'm glad they enjoyed it.
Nice. I'll share now. Here, okay. And the winners. Aqui, ó. Israel Brás Semaão. Tá o telefone dele aí. Eu vou tirar para o pessoal não ver. I just put off because the cell phone number. Mas, Israel, a gente vai entrar em contato com você, ou por telefone ou por e-mail, tá bom? Que bom que você ganhou. Acho que você tava, não sei se você era um dos primeiros aí da sala, alguma coisa assim. Beleza? Pessoal, então é isso. Thank you, Maddog. I'm just finishing saying that this is everything.
Right.
That's all, folks. And if you want to say something, you want to say something to finish?
Just, I hope that the people listening to this take the coronavirus very, very seriously. On February the 17th, I wrote a letter to Campus Party Amazona telling them that the coronavirus was something they should watch out for. On February the 2nd, they wrote back to me and said they were looking at it. On February 17th, there was one case of coronavirus in Brazil. On March the 2nd, there were 2 cases of coronavirus in Brazil. By the time they canceled Campus Party on March the 22nd, there were 250 cases. Now, in Manaus alone, there are thousands. Take it very seriously. It gets worse very fast. And unfortunately, it gets worse in large cities like New York, like Chicago, like Sao Paulo, like Rio de Janeiro, and where density is very big, like in the favelas. So please take it seriously. Think about it. Learn about what makes the virus work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maddog. I will end now. Valeu, pessoal. Obrigado aí. Vou fechar aqui.